The March 2nd City County Planning Commission to order. McKenna, would you, when convenient, call the roll, please?
Commissioner Drain. Commissioner Gay.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Graham.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Shaw.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Starks.
Present.
Commissioner Vitale.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Volkert.
Yes, ma'am.
And Chair Warren.
Yes. Commissioners, you had the minutes from our February 16th meeting in your packet. Are there any questions? Call for a motion, please.
So moved. Second.
Commissioner Volkert.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Drain. Commissioner Gay.
Ma'am.
Commissioner Graham.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Shaw.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Starks.
Yes.
Commissioner Vitale.
Yes, ma'am.
And Chair Warren.
Yes, ma'am. Commissioners, you have the subdivision site development plans in your packets that were mailed to you. Are there any questions regarding the subdivision or site development plans?
Yeah.
All right, hearing none. Councilor Moore, we're entering into our public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. I request that you order the record tonight include all statutory and regulatory provisions, the Commission's entire file for each application, and the qualifications of each staff witness. Finally, I'd ask that you administer the oath to those witnesses.
Swear to tell the truth? Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Is there any old business tonight? No old business. We entered our first hearing tonight. Item number 1, 2023-13Z County, Jeff and Valerie Powell, Kassi and Zach Alsip, Summer and Tristan Adams, and Krystina and Justin Keen have filed an application to rezone tracts of land containing approximately 3.5 acres located at 5440, 5460, 5480, 5488, and 5538 Scottsville Road from RE Residential Estate to general business with a general development plan. Jenny?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had a pre-application meeting for the properties highlighted in yellow in January of this year. And to reiterate the request, the applicants are applying to rezone 3.546 acres located at those properties on Scottsville Road from RE Residential Estate to general business in order to develop the property with multiple buildings that will serve various commercial uses. So the current zoning of the property is RE, the current land use is single-family residential, and then the future land use designation is commercial for this area. They have provided that site plan in front of you for your all's reference. And then just looking down to the points to consider, the proposal complies with the majority of the criteria assessed in the review process and is generally compatible with the surrounding area. Staff has noted a couple of considerations for the proposed development relating to tree preservation and location of proposed parking. And so we'll first look at tree preservation on page 2 under the natural features. And so there are numerous mature trees located on the properties. There are known sinkholes in the vicinity. DPC 14 requires that all existing healthy trees located within 10 feet of the northwest and northeast boundary lines and having a caliper width of 8 inches or greater shall be preserved. DPC 14 also requires that the developer make reasonable efforts to preserve all other mature, healthy trees on the property which do not interfere with utilities, parking, travelways, and building envelopes. However, many of the existing non-perimeter trees are located within those areas. There's also a clump of mature trees located in the area of the proposed drainage area shown on the concept plan, and the applicants address sinkholes in DPC number 11. And then looking over to page 4 under item number 6, the properties are located within the boundary of the Scottsville Road corridor study. And item number 6 references the parking standard, which is that a requirement that either no parking be allowed in the building setback along Scottsville Road or have parking to the rear of the building, as long as the rear is not Scottsville Road. The concept depicts parking in the front of the building setback along Scottsville Road. DPC 9 requires that no greater than 20% of total parking spaces shall be located between Scottsville Road and the front facade of the building closest to Scottsville Road. The proposal therefore does not comply with this recommendation. That is all that staff have for this application, but we're happy to answer any questions.
Walk through condition number 6 again.
So it is a requirement. You're talking about the one under the Scottsville Road corridor study?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that either no parking be allowed in the building setback along Scottsville Road or have parking to the rear of the building, as long as the rear is not Scottsville Road. And since these properties, a majority of the parking is located to the rear, but that DPC requires that no greater than 20% of the total parking spaces shall be located between Scottsville Road. So they limited the amount of parking. However, that doesn't comply with the requirement, which is saying that no parking.
Okay.
So I see that there's landscaping on 3 sides. Since it has residential behind it, is there a requirement for fencing, or is it just landscaping? That's probably a question generally for staff.
Fencing is an option, but it's not a requirement. So you can pick a combination of opaque fencing and/or evergreen trees to meet those landscaping requirements between the residential uses, but it doesn't have to be a fence. But it could be. It's an option.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Sir.
Do you know what type of the outdoor storage that's going to be? Did the applicant indicate what type of storage from a description standpoint?
Rachel may be able to answer that question. However, I don't know.
Mr. Starks, I don't know that they have any definitive plans for outdoor storage at this time, just because the commercial uses that would occupy these spaces are not known at this time, but
Okay.
they had just set a restriction that if there were to be outdoor storage, that it would be at least 75 feet from the property line along Scottsville
Okay,
Road.
thank you.
Yes, sir.
Jenny, I just got to understand this. So, excuse me, requirement number 6, Scottsville Road, there would be no parking facing Scottsville Road on the front of the building.
Yes, so it would be in the building setback along Scottsville Road.
Okay.
So now I've got to ask a question. So like if we go up the street to like Peachtree, there where Sheldon's is, there seems to be parking there. Is that something where we just do the best we can, or is that a stringent thing that we're looking to enforce?
So that's a fair point, and I would say that it would be consistent in the corridor that some of the properties that have been rezoned haven't entirely complied with this recommendation. So
Just thinking about the one that used to be Jimmy Deemer's clearly has gas pumps and parking on Scottsville Road, and then the next one up, probably the Sheldon's is the newest one.
Yeah, and those were done before the corridor
okay.
study.
I see.
But the newer development south at, what's it called, Peachtree something. I'm drawing a
I
blank.
think that may be the same one I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
the one, that's
Yeah.
the one we
Yeah,
approved
and
with
so-
the Q.
Yeah.
The Q.
Q, that's right.
So that one, they do have some parking out front.
They
So
do.
this recommendation, just, it's truly that, it's a recommendation that you either have no parking in the front building setback, which the concept plan doesn't actually show any parking in the front building setback. It shows a travelway in the front building setback. But then the second part of the recommendation is that there might be a situation where an applicant would just agree to not have parking in the front. And they've said that no more than 20% would be in the front.
So they're essentially leaving themselves that option in case they need it. Would that be a fair characterization?
Yeah, I guess I don't know if what's shown on the concept works out to be exactly 20%.
Because you're right, it doesn't really show parking in the front.
Yeah, well, there's parking between the building
Yeah.
and the front property line,
Right.
but it's not actually in the building setback itself,
Ah,
as
okay.
shown on the concept. But in the development plan conditions, there's not a requirement that parking can't go in the setback. It's just that no more than 20% would be in front of the building. So in theory, under the condition, you could have parking in the building setback, even though it's not shown on the concept.
So it can be in front, it just has to be behind the setback line, correct?
There's two parts to the recommendation. Let's see.
First says.
May
no
regret asking that
parking
question.
In between Scottsville Road and the building, correct, Jenny? All right, so that's what it says. but then what they've offered is they've offered to be no more than 20%.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. Commissioners, any other, all minds clear so far? So far, okay. All right, thank you, Jenny. Is the applicant here or their representative tonight?
Yes, Chairman. At Purdue, 1010 College Street, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you, Mr. Purdue.
All right. Good evening, Chairman, members of the commission. I represent the applicants on this matter. Valerie and Jeff Powell are here with me this evening. The other applicants are Jeff and Valerie's daughters and their husbands. Also with me this evening is James Cook, a representative of the applicants, as well as Rodney McGaughy from Van Meter and Slavey. I don't have anything to add to the staff report. However, I would like to comment on some of the questions relative to the parking condition. Mr. Graham posed a good question. There have been developments, rezoning applications approved since the Scottsville Road corridor study that have in fact included parking in between the buildings in Scottsville Road. The Peachtree Shopping Center with the Q Coffee Shop is one. I was before you all in August of last year on behalf of Tim and Portia Pennington, where you approved a highway business zone at the corner of, essentially the corner of Scottsville Road and where the Natcher Parkway cuts in. Mr. Graham, you probably don't remember this, but you asked the exact same question during that hearing.
It's unpredictable, right?
And to Rachel's credit, she gave the exact same answer then that she gave now, and that is that it's not uncommon for these applications not to meet every recommendation. And I think what you'll find by reading the staff report is that's the only recommendation that this might not comply with by letter of the law. What we've attempted to do, which I'm not aware that some of these other developments you've approved has done, is try to reach show some bit of good faith in that we have limited the total parking to be between the front of the buildings in Scottsville Road to only 20% of the total parking spaces. And the reason we did that, and I can have the engineer explain it more if you need it, but just from an access and logistical point of view with how the property is laid out and how the buildings are at least proposed in the concept plan. So we were, rather than to say we weren't going to commit to any parking behind the buildings, again, the 20% came on our end. Again, it's just as somewhat of a gesture to try to show that we're trying to comply given the limitations and logistical issues we have with the property, but that's where the 20% came from. With that, I don't have any other questions or comments, I'm sorry. I'll be happy to answer any questions that the commissioners have and offer up the engineer if you have any.
So to add, the easiest question to ask is, why not just push the building up and take those parking spaces and put them in the back?
You care if I call
Sure.
Mr. McGaughy?
I think we'll get the answer.
Sure. He's going to give it a more technical answer than I'd be able.
Rodney McGahee, 2053 Dyford Road.
Rodney, swear to tell the truth. Thank you.
Okay, so there's a lot of things that are going on. We obviously have existing buildings that we're trying to line up with to keep the common character of the area that we're dealing with there. Those buildings are about 70 feet to the face of the building. Some of their porches are sticking over into the setback there. So that's one of the reasons why we're trying to keep that same character up and down through there with the setback of the building.
The back of that building to match the houses.
Right. So
Okay.
so that kind of negates the fact that we can't pull the building forward and push them to the back. But we're also all the buildings that face Scottsville Road have to have a front facade that faces Scottsville Road. So in a commercial setting, it doesn't really work to have all the parking in the rear, but your front entrance is on the front of the building. So that's kind of where we wanted to have a little bit of parking up front, and it is behind the setback, the proposed setback there. even though we're holding the buildings back a little further. Is that?
Yeah, I mean,
That's kind of.
I mean, honestly, to me, the setback with the other buildings on the street make the most sense to me, so.
And
Okay.
that's the whole point, if we're trying to satisfy multiple things at the same time.
Thank you, Mr. Volkert. Any other questions for the applicant or for Rodney? All right, thank you, Ted.
Thank you.
Is there anyone in the audience tonight that has a question or opposition to this request? All right, hearing none, commissioners would call for a motion, please.
Motion to approve the proposed zoning map amendment together with a condition upon a general development plan, docket number 2023-13Z County, based upon the testimony and documents presented in this public hearing. Proposed zoning map amendment is consistent with the adopted Focus 2030 comprehensive plan as demonstrated by its compliance with the objectives and action items presented in the staff report. Therefore, the zoning map amendment is in agreement with the adopted comprehensive plan. Further request this motion include a summary of evidence and testimony by the witnesses at this public hearing.
Second. Commissioner Gay.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Graham.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Shaw.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Starks.
Yes.
Commissioner Vitale.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Volkert.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Drain. Chair Warren.
Yes, ma'am. The motion is approved and goes to Warren County Fiscal Court for final approval. Our next item tonight is 2023-14Z County, VMP Holdings, LLC, care of Michael Vitale, the applicant, and Richard Wan, MD, LLC, the property owner, have filed an application to rezone a tract of land containing approximately 75.58 acres located at 0 Veterans Memorial Lane from Ag to RM5 multifamily residential and light industrial with a general development plan. Rachel?
Thank you, Chair Warren. We had a pre-application meeting back in December for the property you just outlined on Veterans Memorial Lane. The current zoning is ag, and a portion of the property is also located in the floodplain. Current use is agriculture, and then the future land use classification for the property is mixed-use commercial. Go back to the boundary survey here. You can see the division line running through the center of the property. So the proposal on the top part would be to rezone that to light industrial, and then the bottom roughly half there is proposed to be rezoned to RM4 multifamily residential. The applicant submitted this site plan with their application. Looking at compatibility with the surrounding development, we've noted that the properties are located in the urbanized area, but outside the city of Bowling Green in the unincorporated area of Warren County. And a site characteristic review indicates that there are adequate facilities and infrastructure available to support the development. Under our points to consider, we found that the proposal complies with the majority of the criteria assessed in the review process and is generally compatible with the surrounding area. We had a few points to consider. I'll touch on those briefly. The first on page 2, looking at existing natural features, staff has noted that there is a wooded area consisting of approximately 10 acres along the northern portion of the development. You can see that area in the site plan here, up at the top. And there's also approximately 1 to 2 acres of additional mature trees in the east central portion and the southeast corner of the development. And the applicants in their development plan conditions only agreed to preserve trees within 10 feet of the northern, western, and southern property lines, meaning that a significant portion of the existing trees may be removed to accommodate the proposed development. We had a note next on the permitted uses for the light industrial portion of the development. As you can see on the site plan, some of the proposed light industrial zone properties would back up to the residential portion of the development, and the applicants have only prohibited a few uses, and there are no hours of operation imposed for the light industrial portion of the development. Staff suggested that if the light industrial lots would be occupied by uses or businesses that operate 24 hours a day, that the applicants might consider imposing an increased building setback from these adjacent residential properties. And just for reference, the zoning ordinance requires a minimum setback of 50 feet from residential when you're developing industrial property. We had a note regarding signage. That's on page 3. The proposed light industrial zone allows freestanding signs up to 30 feet tall, up to a sign face area of 100 square feet per sign face.
And the only freestanding signage in this section of Veterans Memorial Lane is much shorter and smaller than the maximum allowed in the proposed LI zone. And the applicants did not agree to place any restrictions on signage for the light industrial portion of the development. And then last, touching on open space, for the RM4 portion of the request, the applicants did agree to provide a minimum of 30% open space. And they mentioned a dog park and grilling areas in their development plan conditions, but there is no requirement in the development plan conditions that the development include these or any other recreational amenities. I believe that is all I have for the staff report, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a question, Rachel. Where was the sign? What number was the sign?
They don't have a development plan condition for signs? Is that the question? Or,
30 feet.
Yeah. yeah.
oh,
What page
gotcha.
is it?
Yeah, in light industrial, you could have a freestanding sign up to 30 feet tall, and the sign face area maximum per the ordinance is 100 square feet. And that would be for each of the industrial lots.
So, I'm sorry, are you done, Chair? If I read the development plan conditions correctly, there is a requirement for something other than vinyl on the two-story structures or any structure that looks like almost any structure that's not single-family. But the single-family seems to be, you could do 100% vinyl. Am I reading that correctly?
So I guess just to clarify really quick, they are actually proposing in the lots, there's a faint line. The lots that may look like single-family lots, those might be either twin homes, attached single-family, or they've left an option to do duplexes on those lots also.
Okay, I see that. It does say
And,
multifamily.
and so in the materials, I believe they've restricted the 2-unit structures to no more than 75% vinyl. That's in development plan condition 4.
So, help me understand here. Are all of these 2-unit structures, is a twin home a 2-unit structure?
Yes, they're hoping to leave the option to do either type of product.
So, if that's the case, why have the first sentence? Because if they're all 2-unit structures, the first sentence seems to suggest that there's something other than 2-unit structures.
Well, there are the multifamily buildings, the apartment buildings. Then they have a separate restriction after that that requires at least 80% of those materials.
Or, okay, more than 2 dwelling units.
So the first sentence seems to speak to
Oh, I see what you're saying. That sentence could almost just be removed.
right, and it also leaves open the possibility if there's something built other than those, it could be 100% vinyl. If I read that correctly, and probably the applicant can expand upon that, or maybe it just be a butchered reading on my part. So I'll accept that possibility as well.
No, I think it's worth clarifying. So,
Are you all referring to the first sentence?
First sentence.
Of DPC number 4?
Number
Yes,
4.
yeah, that's right, Hamp. And then
I think it's just that those are the options for the materials that they would use, and then they go on to restrict the amount of vinyl that could be used in either product.
got it.
But you're right. If in fact, let's say they had a proposal and they came in and didn't want to build duplexes or twin homes, and they just wanted to build single-family homes, that's not entirely addressed in this paragraph, as far as percentage limitations.
And then my second question is on the LI portion. What is the barrier requirement between the residential and the LI, or is there one?
So there's 2 separate requirements. There's a building setback requirement. So any building constructed on the light industrial lots would have to be at least 50 feet from the property line.
Okay.
And then there's also a 10-foot landscape buffer. So you could have parking or travel ways up to 10 feet from the property line. So that would be a separate buffer requirement.
So it isn't, the reason I ask is it isn't indicated on the concept plan, and of course, if we're zoning it tonight, it's not going to come back to us, but would it be fair to say that whoever the applicant is, they would have to adhere to those landscape buffer requirements?
there would be a minimum 10-foot buffer and then a minimum 50-foot building setback.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Rachel, am I just missing it, on the 16 plexes? What is my exterior?
That should be number 4. It would be at least 80% of exterior facades of structures for those dwelling units would be brick, stone, hardy board, or modern masonry, brick or stone foundations.
It's like we could basically strike the first sentence, right? Since the second sentence starts with at least 80%.
Possibly. I think the issue then becomes is if there's 75% and then there's 80%, well, what's the balance of that? And I think the first sentence at least clarifies that it would be one of those things.
Okay.
And I suspect that's the intent. We'll ask the applicant if they could maybe clarify that a little bit.
Then, this is probably a question for the applicant.
Christian, pull your mic down, please.
It's so I see where we're going to have a neighborhood association. Is the apartments going to be managed by one company? Am I
I
reading?
thought that was in here
Am I just
somewhere.
missing it?
Hold on. Maybe it's not in here.
We'll ask.
I don't see it. That may be a question for the applicant.
We'll ask.
Commissioners, any other questions for Ms. Hurd? Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
Is the applicant here or their representative?
Good evening, Chris Davenport, 921 College, and I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you, Chris.
Let me address, let's talk first about the materials, and I'll give you my thoughts on why that first sentence should not be taken out. And I'll tell you in the past, let me make sure I'm on, is that number 4? Number 4. In the past, I would not have included that. But what's been mentioned in the past in other applications is without that first sentence, then there's nothing keeping someone from coming in and putting in a wood-sided structure or some other material. We don't really talk about that anymore. I can't remember the last time someone proposed a wood-sided structure. But at least in the past, there's been a desire to list every possible facade material first and then go out, and this does get a little bit complicated because you got 2 different kind of classes of structure here. I think the point is well taken, and it's something I overlooked. What if there's a 1-unit structure? And that would not be barred from 100% vinyl. So I think what we need to do to get the intent right, and first of all, they have no intention of a 1-unit structure, but I think what we need to say is that the second sentence should read, exteriors of any structure containing 2 units or less shall not exceed, and then the rest is the same. The intent there clearly is a brick, stone, masonry front facade to those structures. And then the larger, up to 16 plexes, would be 80% brick masonry facade, or facades. Both prohibit brick, split-faced or plain-faced foundations. The last thing I'll say on that is, in your staff report, they mentioned that our materials, and this did change. I'll tell you that from their initial application. When we got the staff notes, one of their points were they compared what we were proposing to what's existing in some pretty recent developments, Jennings Creek. I don't think they mentioned Keystone. I will mention Keystone in a minute. But they pointed out what those materials were, and then we changed ours, and you'll note the staff note point is that we are now comparable, both on the RM4 and the LI facades.
On the RM4, it was 80%?
Correct. Now, on the larger structures. On the LI, I think we've gone beyond that in what's comparable in the area, because our LI has, I think, a pretty unique DPC that requires the front facades of the light industrial buildings to be stone or masonry up to 8 feet in height on the front facade. So a lot of times when you talk about LI, you're talking primarily metal siding, hidden fasteners. Those buildings will also have up to 8 feet, at least 8 feet of stone on the front, which is something I think is worth pointing out here on that. There aren't really any other revisions that I would propose at this point. What I did want to stress to you commissioners, the one point is that our materials on both zone classes are comparable to what's there. Our density for the RM4 is at 10.6. In the area is up to 25.97. Our RM4 contains 30% open space. That's twice the zoning minimum of 15%. The note that Rachel made about the dog park and the grilling stations, as far as amenities, my intent is that's required. Initially, we didn't have that. So the DPC that speaks to it is (11). The neighborhood association shall maintain common amenities, including grilling areas and dog park. So if y'all want that worded more strongly, paren, what shall be included, in paren, I'm fine with that. That was the intent.
Chris, one management company on the,
We don't have that restriction, and I'll tell you why we don't have that restriction. What we have in its place is DPC number 12, and that's why I said earlier I was going to mention Keystone.
well, but, okay, so that'll be my next question, is why are we doing 2 colors of bricks and 3 colors of vinyl?
That's what Keystone did. I mean, I completely wrong. That was the same DPC that's applicable, and I'm not sure if it's Keystone or Keystone Commons, but that's the multifamily development that's down Veterans Memorial.
When was that done?
I did that probably, somebody help me, 3 years ago, 2 years ago?
3.
Was it that long?
Things have changed in the last 5 years. And so from my perspective, I don't like 2 colors. I just don't think we want another Nutterville.
I will talk to Mr. Rogers, who's present with me, about the number of those options. I'll tell you, the number was not a topic of high debate.
Sure.
So.
I wouldn't think it's a big deal.
Yeah. The other thing I'll point out, that HOI, initially, we were only going to include the larger structures. Staff had suggested we include the 2-unit structures in the HOA, and we've done that. So all of those owners.
Sorry, so back to my question. Are these 16 plexes, are they going to be individually platted?
Yes.
They are individually platted?
Correct.
Okay.
With easements, with reciprocal parking
Okay.
easements.
Okay.
So Chris, is that the reason you don't have a single entity? You're anticipating
You're gonna sell the lots.
multiple
Correct.
owners?
They're selling the lots.
They would be multiple owners, and that's why we
Okay.
have this, again, this restriction is, and the developer will have to come up with the colors and all that, and the plans that will have to be stuck to. And then the HOA will maintain the common areas.
So you're gonna talk to your applicant, talk to your client about uniformity?
Correct.
Okay, very good.
And we have, it's all a degree. So what Mr. Volkert's suggesting is we have too many options, I think, if I understand the concern there.
That would be I get separate owners and separate, I get that, but I'm just not a big fan of 3 colors of vinyl out there.
I'll talk to Mr. Rogers.
Chris, on the signage on page 3, sign face of 100 square feet, the only freestanding signage in this section of veterans is much smaller and shorter than the maximum allowed in LI. The applicants did not agree to place restrictions on signage in the LI portion. You might want to.
It's been a topic of some esoteric debate between Ms. Hurt and I. We've gone deep into kind of some planning theory and how we get to these conditions. Do y'all have that picture? I think I would like to show I emailed a picture to staff earlier today. And the sign that's mentioned is across Veterans Memorial, and it's a Simply Mulch facility. The reason I want to show that to you, I don't know how long they've had that sign there. That sign is a 4x4, 2 4x4 posts with, I don't know if that's plywood or what that is. And the reason I point that out is, for all intents and purposes, I feel like my applicant here, typically on signs, I think this is the first time I've ever debated signs where the request wasn't, here's what's in the area, here's what people have agreed to, here's what's being built, here's what has been built. We are asking you to conform to that so that your sign is not materially different than what's in place. This seems to me to be the converse of that. With no due respect to this sign, I don't feel like there really is a sign on Veterans Memorial. And I think the staff would more or less concede that, and I think the staff would say, well, it's your opportunity to kind of be a trendsetter. My rhetorical question to staff was, the ordinance has a sign restriction for LI. It's what's in the ordinance. When we come here and you are debating compatibility with what's out there, that's when I'm usually asked, and my applicants are asked to bring that down. I literally ask staff, what would you like to see? And they can't really offer that because there's nothing there to compare to. And Rachel could speak to that if I'm misstating anything. But my statement to Rachel was, if a 30-foot, 100-foot sign face is inappropriate for LI in a dearth of anything different, why is that the way the ordinance reads? And that's a rhetorical question, but that's the context here.
Let me see if I understand. Your first question is, if I comply with the ordinance, it's going to be materially different than what is already there? Would that be a fair statement?
It's typically, and when I say typically, to my knowledge, every time I've had an applicant asked to concede something on a sign, that's the rationale for it.
So I think another thing that would come into play here is how old, or is that a grandfathered in sign, or is that?
To be clear, Commissioner Graham, my position is, I mean, I don't know if that sign's even conforming with the ordinance, frankly.
Okay.
I don't know how long we should expect that sign to be there. I don't know if that's the type of signage that we would be looking to set a standard along Veterans Memorial for. I'm really considering this issue that we're the first to put a proper sign on Veterans Memorial. How tall and how big should that be? And should we mediate or deviate from the zoning ordinance when there's nothing there yet?
Okay, and so, but here's the thing I don't think I understand. I know Rachel's going to speak to this issue a little more directly. What size sign are you suggesting?
Would be, I mean, the limit would be the zoning limit of 30 feet with a 100 feet square face.
Okay. That is in conflict with what?
So it's not in conflict with the ordinance, but I will say that the Planning Commission, in reviewing these applications, can consider each application individually within the context of the area where the development is proposed. There virtually exists, for all intents and purposes, no signage in this corridor along Veterans, basically north of the intersection with Morgantown Road, all the way back around until you probably get to, what is that, Victoria Street? Or at any rate, I guess the staff felt that coming in, there's 8 lots shown on the concept. So you could have 8 lots, all with a 30-foot tall sign with 100 square feet of sign face area. And in our opinion, that would be completely out of the character of what's there now because there is no signage. So like Chris said, now's the time to be the trendsetter, I guess. And maybe a 30-foot tall sign with 100 square feet of sign face area that's shared by all 8 of those properties, that might be appropriate. And then each building could have its own individual wall signage. But I guess that's to be determined, and that was part of the conversation that we had, and I don't know that there was ever.
So I'm finally just now getting it. So we could have 8 of these right there in one spot.
Well, and there's no limit on the number of industrial lots in the development plan conditions, so they could, in theory, chop it up into 12 lots or 13 lots and have even more signs.
So Chris, she makes a pretty good point. We would essentially have a lot of signs a lot of big signs.
But to their defense, there's nothing comparable. So.
It
it's-
gets into a lot, yeah.
So it's not necessarily not compatible because there's nothing to compare it to.
So let me approach it from a different angle too. What character do you want to set in this brand-new area? Do you want 30-foot tall signs on a stick? Or maybe it's monument-style signs, maybe it's consolidated type signage. So that's just the concern. You got to remember, the zoning ordinance is the minimum standard.
Sure.
Not the maximum standard. So these are the minimums.
Yeah, so Chris, I guess the question to you guys are you willing to change on your signs what you're willing to do?
Again, that's a question for my applicant. The debate always is between myself and staff. If we as a community think that a 30-foot sign is ridiculous, we need to change the ordinance. And I know we don't change the ordinance all the time for everything, but that's a lot of times the debate that we have.
So the debate, to continue that, and this will be very short, is this is the zoning ordinance minimum for the entire county. Is that appropriate in this area? Is this board's decision and the applicant's opportunity to set a better standard than the minimum?
So if I may, let me ask a question for staff, just from a layperson's perspective. If that's the minimum standard, if I go down Scottsville Road, for example, that's still the minimum standard, is that correct? But those are consolidated signs. So you got a sign, but if there's 10 different.
There are different.
Some of them are consolidated. That's a different type of signage under the ordinance, but just like your individual commercial properties, your restaurants or your banks or I'm just trying to think of, but yeah.
As you get close to
So-
the interstate, you have a whole nother sign standard that we often don't
Okay.
have to deal with.
Got it.
Right.
I would like to hear what the applicant has to say, and then maybe we.
Yeah, I think
continue
it's a
this
good
debate.
idea. Let's see what we get there.
I don't really, and I'll do that, obviously. Other than that, the other points I was going to make is our LI actually backs up to HI. That's on your zoning map. Stuart Ritchie's properties to the back of what we're asking to be zoned to light industrial. Transportation-wise, we made all the requirements that the cabinet wanted. That's the long and short of it. So.
Chris, you don't have it on your concept plan, but there would be a landscape buffer between the.
Yeah, Commissioner Graham, so like years ago, I used to put that this would be on sewer.
Right.
And then the staff started to say, get rid of the stuff that you have to do anyways.
Right.
We don't, so we have to comply with the landscape requirement, the setback requirement for the LI to the residential without being written in a DPC.
Thank you.
Chris, personally, as just one commissioner, I'd like to see us limit the number of signs. So if there are 12 lots, hypothetically in this, that we would limit it to one sign per 3 lots. So that we don't have, if it's 12 lots, and that's what you all choose to do, we don't have 12 signs.
Rachel and I debated some of that, and are we able to do that? Because I know you kind of maybe weren't
Well,
sure.
couldn't we do that with multi?
Yeah, used to you couldn't, but we decided a few zoning ordinance amendments ago, if people want to share one sign, that's fine. They just have to agree to do that. If it's in the same development, so it's technically off premise of where the building is, but if everybody in this industrial development elected to share one freestanding sign on Veterans Memorial at the frontage, then that's what we were saying, is that maybe a 30-foot tall sign with 100 square feet of sign face area, if it's monument style and tastefully done, that might be nice for this development.
Problem with that is when you take 100 square feet, that sounds like a lot. You cut that 10 ways, 10 square feet doesn't get you much of a sign when you're doing 55 miles an hour down Veterans Memorial.
Or you could maybe.
Or more.
Or you could maybe apply for a waiver, and your unique argument is that you have 12 properties that are wanting to agree to participate in this one sign.
Let me discuss it with my client, if I may. If there's no other questions.
So Hamp, while he's working on that, so just to clarify, we changed the wording on those first sentence of 4, or was the second sentence of 4?
Second sentence that I heard, and that is that in the second sentence of 4, it will now read, exteriors of 2-unit structures or less
There we go. Okay, very good.
shall not exceed.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Moore, 11, did we do the parentheses after dog park, which shall be included?
Well, okay, or what I was going to have that sentence say, the neighborhood association shall construct and maintain common amenities, including grilling areas and dog park. Does that do the same thing?
Oh. Brick number.
Brick color.
And single management is off the table, right?
They're going to sell the lots, they can't. They're going to address uniformity, but it won't be single management.
Can you read what I heard you say about the dog park and the,
You're going to build the dog.
the neighborhood association shall construct and maintain?
That's correct.
Okay. And then on number 4,
Second sentence, exteriors of 2-unit structures or less shall not exceed.
on the number 12, Commissioners, my client has authorized me to limit the brick color to 1 and the cement, board, plank, or vinyl siding to 1. On the signage, they've authorized me to, and I guess, yeah,
No more than 1,
brick color,
I got that, and then what was the second one?
and no more than 1 color of cement, board, plank, and/or vinyl siding.
Thank you, sorry.
And I guess we'll need to do a new DPC on the LI that would be number 9, that would read, no sign shall exceed 20 feet in height or 75 square feet in sign face, is what they would ask.
So, just a shorter sign, smaller sign.
Correct. And bear in mind, these are LI buildings. And one thing I wanted to make sure he was aware of, LI allows up to 100 feet in height. We've restricted it to 50. We've cut that in half. But you will have significantly scaled buildings. So, you know, the sign has to do its job a little bit.
Just to add to that, you'd also be allowed up to 10% of the facade of that big building as well to be a sign.
Of all facades.
Of all
Of each
facades.
facade.
I think it would be very tough to try to get down to 3 signs. I mean, you would have to have 2 neighboring people that agree on the, I mean, and then you'd almost have to write it into, this lot's got 1, but they have to offer this lot a chance to be on their sign. I think that creates more difficulties than personally, I'm okay with lowering the height and the size of the sign.
So I may just add one more, just a comment. I don't know if it matters to the commission, but like the Trans Park, for example, all of those properties have individual freestanding signs, and those development plan conditions limit the height to 7 or 8 feet. I can't remember exactly, but it's monument style, 7 or 8 feet tall, with I think like maybe 40 or 50 square feet of sign face area.
But is it fair to say that most of the stuff in the Trans Park is heavy industrial, and you're not having a lot of people in and out on a daily basis, where this light industrial might have more customers coming and going?
5,000
mix.
employees?
Well,
Yeah, I mean, it's-
your Trans-Park lots are,
It's
I'm
a
talking
mix
about,
of
I'm talking about a
zoning.
customer looking for their building.
yeah, your
So
Trans-Park
that's what I'm
lots
saying, yeah.
are much greater in size than these LI lots we're talking about. It's hard to compare the signage these lots need with what Magna needs as far as a
Vanderbilt
destination.
Court has similar signage sizes that we can debate it all.
Well, I hope the concession's reasonable. I do think it's significant.
Kemp, would you read his sign?
The development plan condition for the LI portion of the development under number 9 will read, signage for each lot shall be limited to 20 feet in height, and that ought to be freestanding signage. Freestanding signage shall be limited to 20 feet in height and 75 square feet per face,
Sign face area.
75 square feet sign face area.
And one question I have, did we talk about the style of freestanding signage? Would these be pole signs or monument style signs?
I think we want to address that, because we didn't say, did we? Yeah, right,
One
exactly.
example of a 20-foot tall monument style sign would be like Toyota sign on the corner of,
Chris, would these be
Campbell
pole signs?
Not restricted to monument. The DPC I've offered would not restrict it to monument.
Would or would not?
Would not. Could be.
Can't think of an application that this body has approved in recent times that didn't include a requirement that signage be monument style.
Chris, is it your intent to have pole-style signs?
To be completely honest, it's not their intent to have one or the other. The developer will not develop these lots. The DPC that I've provided, it would be up to whoever comes in and builds their LI property to decide what kind of sign to put. The DPC I've offered would not restrict pole signs, though.
So with that said, is Rodney okay if we make a monument sign, since they're not the ones really building
In the
them?
past, that's not been the case, but I'm getting ready to ask that question. He was
Okay.
mentioning something else to me, too.
Okay.
We were just saying the same thing.
Hey, Rachel did it.
The compromise that I've convinced Mr. Rogers to agree to would be this. What number are we at? That's number 12,
9,
number 9,
aren't we? Isn't that right?
it's number 9, it's the new 9. No sign shall exceed 20 feet in height or 75 square feet in sign face, and any sign constructed on a lot adjoining Veterans Memorial will be of monument style. And he has asked me to clarify one thing, and that is back to our number of colors. He would like that one brick, one vinyl restriction to apply to any structure more than 2 units. The thought being, he doesn't really want every 2-unit structure to be identical. And he pointed out, he asked me, what's that apply to? And as I read it, it would apply to all of them. So I would like to, back to 12, and just add in, the developer will specify a uniform color scheme for all structures exceeding 2 units, so as to allow uniformity in appearance, no more than 1 brick color that blends in style and color, no more than 1 roof color, no more than 1 trim color, no more than 1 color of cement board or vinyl siding that blend in style and color with all other exterior building products or color schemes, period. So that would only apply to the larger apartment buildings.
What about the last sentence? Because then it says this development plan condition applies to the entire development.
It still applies.
So you would still have consistent roof lines, columns, gable brackets, railings?
Yes.
Okay, that part would still.
It all still applies. It's just by putting in that the uniform color scheme for all structures exceeding 2 units, that sentence would only apply to the larger structures. And that's a matter of taste, and frankly, I think that's a good point. I'm sorry to revise a DPC I've already revised once, so hopefully that works.
All right, Mr. Davenport, before you sit down, Commissioners, any other questions for Mr. Davenport? Mr. Davenport, if you'd ask the applicant to come up and Mr. Moore could read the revised condition plans. Rodney?
To tell the truth.
Oh, you got to tell your name and your address.
Rodney Rogers, I swear to tell the truth.
What's your address?
191 Windmere Court.
Thank you.
Mr. Rogers?
Oh, Mr. Moore?
You've heard these DPCs
Yes, sir.
described. I want to run over them real quickly and make sure you agree to them. I'm looking at the DPCs for the RM4 portion, and in DPC number 4, the second sentence, it is now proposed to read that the exteriors of 2-unit structures or less shall not exceed, and the balance of that sentence as originally prepared. Do you agree with that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then in DPC number 11 of the RM4 portion of the development, the final sentence of number 11 would now read, the neighborhood association shall construct and maintain common amenities, including grilling areas and dog park.
Yes, sir.
Do you agree to that? And then moving on to number 12 of the RM4 portion, the first sentence will now read, the developer will specify a uniform color scheme for all structures exceeding 2 units so as to allow uniformity in appearance, parentheses, no more than 1 brick color, that blends in style and color, no more than 1 roof color, no more than 1 trim color, no more than 1 color of cement board plank or vinyl siding. Is that your proposal? Thanks. In the portion that deals with the LI part of the development, there's a new DPC number 9, and it is proposed to now read that signage in the LI portion of the development shall be limited to 20 feet in height or 75 square feet in face area, period. Any sign on property which fronts Veterans Memorial Boulevard shall be monument style.
Yes.
Any other questions for the applicant?
I don't have any questions, but I have a comment, which actually is a compliment. Thanks for your working with us on making those concessions,
Well, I think it's a good compromise.
because that's what it takes to get these things through, and the more we compromise and discuss those things, the better for both parties.
Agree.
Thank you, gentlemen. Commissioners, is there anybody in the audience tonight that has a comment regarding this application or opposition? Hearing none, commissioners would call for a motion, please.
I make the motion. Here we go. I make the motion to approve the proposed zoning map amendment together with and conditioned upon the general development plan, docket number 2023-14-Z County. Based upon the testimony and documents presented in this public hearing, the proposed zoning map amendment is consistent with the adopted Focus 2030 Comprehensive Plan as demonstrated by its compliance with the objectives and action items presented in the staff report. Therefore, the proposed zoning map amendment is in agreement with the adopted comprehensive plan. Further, I request that this motion include the summary of evidence and testimony presented by the witnesses at this public hearing.
Second.
Commissioner Drain.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Gay.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Graham.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Shaw.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Starks.
Yes.
Commissioner Volkert.
Yes, ma'am.
And Chair Warren.
The motion is approved and will go to Warren County Fiscal Court for final approval. Our next item tonight is 2023-15Z County. Southern Saw Homes LLC and the City County Planning Commission have filed an application to rezone a portion of a tract of land containing approximately 1.3 acres located 0 Anderson Road from RE residential state to agriculture.
This is a cleanup, Chair Warren, so we may want to do them together.
Okay, thank you.
And, yeah.
All right, we'll clean it up. 2023, next item. Next item is 2023-16Z County. Robin and Samuel Wilkie and the City County Planning Commission have filed an application to rezone portions of a tract of land containing approximately 0.77 acres located at 0 Halls Chapel Road from agriculture to RE residential estate and RE residential estate to RE residential and RE residential estate to ag. So that's cleanup, correct?
Yeah, they're both cleanups. We don't really have a formal presentation for either staff report. Essentially, with both of these scenarios, plat has already been recorded, and when that happened, the properties became split zoned. And so the property owner gave us limited power of attorney to correct the zoning at this hearing. And so that's what the purpose of these two applications is. And I know it looks like we might have somebody in the audience that might have a question or
Yes,
concern.
yes, sir. Do you have a question regarding either one of these? If you'd come to the microphone, please, sir. Yes, sir. If you'd state your name and address, please, sir.
Tom Sullivan.
Okay, and your address, Mr. Sullivan?
1040 Halls Chapel.
Road. And you swear to tell the truth, sir?
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, I know it was agricultural and then was residential. I don't know. I don't.
That's fine.
I've had a stroke.
Okay, sure.
So we're just gonna clean that up tonight. We're just gonna get it all to one.
Okay.
For the 1.7 acres.
All right. Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Sullivan.
you. Okay.
Yes, sir. So we need we need to have two separate motions on this, or one?
You could do one, just call off, make sure to
Both
call
numbers.
off both case numbers
Okay.
in your motion.
Make a motion to approve the proposed zoning map amendment to docket number 2023-15Z County and 2023-16Z County. Based upon the documents presented in this public hearing, the proposed zoning map amendment is consistent with the adopted Focus 2030 comprehensive plan as demonstrated by its compliance and objective action items presented in the staff report. Therefore, the proposed zoning map amendment is in agreement with the adopted comprehensive plan. Further requests is include a summary of evidence and testimony presented by the witnesses at this public hearing.
Second. Commissioner Gay?
Ma'am.
Commissioner Graham?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Shaw? Yes, ma'am. Commissioner Starks?
Yes.
Commissioner Vitale? Yes, ma'am. Commissioner Volkert? Yes, ma'am. Commissioner Drain? And Chair Warren?
Yes, ma'am. Both motions have been approved and will go to Warren County Fiscal Court for final approval. Do we have any new business tonight, Mr. Peterson? All right. Any discussion items, commissioners? Thank you all for being here, and we stand adjourned to our March the 16th meeting.